So my name is Debbie. I did join the League of Women, or was a member 20 years ago, but didn't have time for it. I still have been involved in politics, and I want to thank you for being interested in this very important topic. Now, as you know, we citizens, we elect senators, and we elect people from the House of Representatives at both the federal and the state level. Now, except for senators, because everybody in the state of Ohio votes for the same senators, but except for the senators, then each representative is elected by people in a district. Now, presumably, the reason for this is that representative will then be focused on the needs for the people in that district. So this year, the legislative boundaries will be redrawn to reflect changes in the population. The fight for fair districts is the fight to create districts that keep together communities of interest so we can better advocate for the needs of our communities, and also to create districts that were not specifically designed to favor a political party. We want a competition of ideas. So that's the broad overview of this topic. So now this slide, actually, it says what is fair districts, but it actually refers to the organizations. So fair districts is an organization. It's a coalition of a variety of groups, including the league, a coalition of groups that are interested in voting rights, Common Cause. They're a really great organization. Now, it's Fair Districts that trained me to give this presentation, and Fair Districts also provided these initial slides. So we Ohioans, we want, let me try and get rid of this one, which I can't do. So we Ohioans, we want fair maps. I know some of you were probably involved in passing the citizen-led reforms. It was passed in all of the counties. It was passed by 70% of the vote. There is bipartisan support for getting fair districts. Now, we're just in the initial stages, so this is a time when we should be thinking about what do we want our districts to look like, and to make sure that our politicians, that the people who are in office, are attending to what we think are good districts. So here's a little bit of an overview. I'm going to talk a little bit more about redistricting and why it's important to have fair districts. We'll talk about the new rules and the timeline, how you can get involved. And at the end, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about the districts that we have here in Northwest Ohio. So I wish I could get, can you, because there's this bar at the top. I don't know if you can see it, but it's, I don't quite know how to get rid of it. But we're going to start talking about redistricting at the federal level, or apportionment. So Congress decided that the U.S. House of Representatives should have 435 members. They wanted a number that would be easy to deal with, and that number has actually changed over time. Now, each state must have one member, and there are some states that only have one. But the total number that's allocated to each state is based on the population of the state, which is based on the census, which is done every 10 years. We want these districts to be roughly equal in size. Now, if you've been paying attention to the news, you know that we should be getting the census results now, but they've been delayed, and I'll say a little bit about that. But the experts believe that because the population of Ohio has shrank relative to the population in other states, we're actually going to lose a seat. We're going to go from 16 to 15. And in looking at the history, apparently this happened in with the last census as well. Okay, so looking at the State House and Senate, the Assembly, now here, the number of districts is actually specified in the Ohio Constitution, so the number of districts is not going to change. We're going to have 33 Senate districts, 99 House of Representatives. So even though the number itself isn't going to change, that we may need to shift the district boundaries based upon population. What you're looking at is a map of the state Senate districts and the state House districts, and I'll be saying a little bit more about this later. So this slide shows you the basic idea of redistricting. We're using small numbers for simplicity. So let's say we have a state that has 20 people, and the law requires 4 districts. So the districts have to be drawn so that there's 5 individuals in each district, and you can see that has been achieved in this far left chart. So over the 10-year period, the population of this state is likely to change, but it's going to change more in some parts of the states than others. That it might change. In this diagram, you can see we have this far right, upper right district has increased, the lower left district has decreased. So we now have to redraw the district boundaries so that we have the same number of people. So the population grew to 24. We now need 6 people in each district. So let's take this little guy here. Who's wearing brown, he had been in this district to the upper right, but because there's now too many people in this district, the district boundary was redrawn, so he was moved into the district on the left. So that's the basic idea of redistricting. Now, redistricting provides an opportunity to create districts that favor one party, provides the opportunity for a power grab, so that when we look at the number of elected officials, they don't resemble the political preferences of the citizens. So we're going to take cats and dogs. So we have a state in which the population consists of 20 cats and 30 dogs. So cats are in the minority. They are about 40% or 2/5 of the state. So let's say that the laws require 5 districts. There are a number of ways that we could evenly split the population into 5 districts with 10 animals each. And these 3 diagrams on the right are ways we could do it. So in this second diagram, we've divided the population into columns. So here we have 2 districts entirely of cats, 10 cats, and then we have 3 districts entirely of dogs. So if each of these districts had an election, the likely outcome would be that 2 cats would be elected in the cat districts and 3 dogs would be elected in the dog districts. Now, they're referring to this as a perfect representation, not because it's a perfect district, because I can think of some problems with this, but because the elected officials of 3 dogs and 2 cats exactly matches the political preferences of the voting population. So now let's look at this third diagram, where what we've done is we have divided the population based upon rows. Now notice here, each of the districts is identical in that each district consists of 4 cats and 6 dogs. So notice what happens here, though, is that there is not a single district that has a cat majority. There is not a single district in which a cat is likely to be elected. So cats are underrepresented, and the term that you'll see referred to this is that the population of cats has been split or has been cracked, so that they're not a majority in any district, so that they're not likely to have any, in this case, any representation, but you can do it so you can construct districts to minimize the number of cats that are elected. And we'll see some examples of this. And finally, in this last diagram, it's a little bit hard to see, but if we look at these two districts on the right, this one district grabs this one cat, circles around and includes 9 dogs. And then this lower district grabs 9 dogs and then picks up this one cat. Now, the term that's applied to this is that the dogs have been stuffed or packed into a couple of districts. And what this means is that for the remaining districts, it's possible for the remaining 3 districts, it's possible to have cat majorities. So in each of the remaining 3 districts, we have 6 cats and 4 dogs. So the likely outcome here is that 3 cats would be elected and 2 dogs would be elected. So the point here, the point of this slide, is that districts can be drawn to favor a political party so that the set of elected officials does not closely resemble the preferences of the population as a whole. So it creates safe seats for certain politicians. Now, you may be thinking what really is a good way to create these districts, and we'll talk about that in some of the later slides. So, gerrymandering. I'm sure everybody has heard this term. Gerrymandering is the political manipulation of districts to secure seats for one party. And it didn't take politicians long to discover this power-grabbing strategy. It was in 1812 when the governor of Massachusetts approved districts that would be drawn to favor his party. Now, supposedly, one of the districts looked like a salamander, and I've never seen a district or seen a diagram in which the critter looks like a salamander, because this guy has wings. But because it reminded some people of a salamander, and the governor was named, his last name was Gerry with a G, that this strategy became known as gerrymandering. So this slide outlines some of the problems. It creates safe districts, so the citizens can become disengaged. And because it's a safe district, then the politician can ignore policies that are popular among the citizens and really focus on what do my big donors want. Now, it can also lead to more extreme candidates because people who vote in the primary, sometimes the people who are really excited about the primary, are those who are more extreme in ideology. So that leads to the most extreme candidate being elected. So what you're looking at now is a drawing of some of the gerrymandered districts. I want to call your attention, it's not on this slide here, but I will be saying more about this district that's been dubbed the snake on the lake. We'll be talking about that in detail because that is in our area. But here's some other examples. So these are the current districts, and they were drawn by the party that was in power in 2011 when the districts were redrawn then. And as you can see, it creates some pretty unusual districts. We have the little ducky here, District 4 that sprawls over quite a bit of the state, and this cute little critter here, dragon perhaps, but the little crown snatches some people from this district, and the little claws dig into this district. So by the way these districts are drawn, we have 4 seats that consistently have been won by the Democrat and 16 seats that have been consistently run by the Republican. So this is for the US House of Representatives. Now, no seats have changed party in the 10 years that we have been using these districts. So that really does show you how gerrymandered we are. Because in most states, I've been told that that's unusual. In most states over a 10-year period, that you would expect some seats to switch from one party to the other party. So the idea of predictable results. When you have gerrymandered districts, you can pretty much count on, it's a safe bet, who's going to win the election. So what this chart is intended to show is that it compares the percentage of people who voted for each party across all of the elections that were held to the number of seats that were actually won by that party. So looking at this diagram on the left, this is for the US House of Representatives. So in this time period, 2012 to 2020, about 45% of Ohioans voted for the Democrat in the US House of Representatives, but the Democrat won only 25% of the seats. Turning to this right-hand side, this is for the state house. That here again, it was about 45% of Ohioans wanted the Democratic candidate to win, but the Democrat candidate won 36% of the seats. It's a little bit closer here.
Sorry.
So on a statewide level, if we look on a statewide level, we had been considered swing states. It looks like now we're turning to a leaning Republican state. So we lean Republican overall, but if we look at who's in the legislature, it's pretty much vastly outnumbered by the Republicans pretty much vastly outnumber the Democrats in the House of Legislature. Now, Ohio is gerrymandered in favor of Republicans, but this isn't always the case. I mean, I grew up in California. California is a reliably Democrat state, and it was the Democrats that were doing the gerrymandering. So here we're going to next go into some examples of some gerrymandered states, of gerrymandered district, and here's one that is important to us. District 9, the snake on the lake. Now, an important reason for having politicians elected by a subset of the politician is that the representative can then really focus on the needs of the people who elected that individual. If the district is really spread out, if it contains too many special interests, then the elected official is really going to struggle to meet the needs. So District 9 stretches from Toledo, it captures Toledo, goes along the lake, and then stops in the neighborhoods of Cleveland, just outside of Cleveland. It's hard for the representative to travel to all these constituents to get to know them. And think about this, people living just 10 miles west of Cleveland aren't in the district with Cleveland, but they're in the district with Toledo all the way at the other end of the state. So if these people just 10 miles from Cleveland want to ask their representative for an issue that involves Cleveland, they have to appeal to somebody for whom Cleveland is not really part of their turf. This bottom chart shows that the diversity and the interests of this district. So these are all some of the counties that are involved in this district. Some of the counties are focused on science, others on farming, some on manufacturing. So the politician who's responsible for this district has to be an expert in all of these areas to meet the needs of all of these constituents. It would certainly be a lot easier if there were just a smaller number of industries, so that the representative just needed to be an expert in a few areas. So cracking. Now, remember that refers to the how the political power of a group of people can be diluted by grabbing small parts out of that population and dispersing them throughout a number of districts. So District 9 shows the cracking of Hamilton County. The picture on the right shows an actual map. It grabs parts of Cincinnati, wanders around, and then actually pulls in all of this one county here up to the upper right.
Dayton.
This image here is supposed to illustrate the fact that the Xavier University basketball court, the court itself is in this district, but the parking lot right across the street from the court is actually in a different district. And in this bottom picture, this shows you how isolated some people can be from the rest of the people in their district. A house on this street is in District 1, but that house is surrounded on 3 sides by people in a different district. We had a political scientist speak to us about the impact of these highly cracked districts. And he said that people who live in districts like this are less likely to know who is running in their district. Because you imagine you look out to yard signs, you're surrounded by yard signs for people who are running in a different district, and how confusing that must be. So this slide illustrates how redrawing a district could change which candidate would be preferred. So this is District 15. So if you look on the left at this diagram on the left, this is how District 15 looked from 2002 to 2012. So it's fairly compact. So when the 2008 presidential election was held, Obama carried District 15, about 54% to 45%. Now, after the 2010 census, District 15 was redrawn, and it was redrawn in a way that made it more sprawling. District 15 contained fewer areas of Columbus, and that allowed it to spread out further into Appalachia. Now, if when the 2008 election had been held, this is the way District 15 looked, we would have seen almost the reverse result. McCain would have won 53% to 46%. So this chart illustrates how districts can be flipped by choosing who is in the district. Now, when this district was changed, it also changed the demographics. This old 15 was primarily people who were highly educated, had high incomes. New 15 contains some of that demographic, but it also contains communities with very little education and high rates of poverty. Now, in theory, an elected official could fully attend to the needs of both these demographics. But if one of these demographics is just a small proportion of the district, or if one of the demographics is not very vocal, their needs are likely to be overlooked. So where are we now? Now, many of you know that reforms were passed, but the maps are redone after the census. So the maps are in the process of being redrawn now. We should be using them in 2022, but, and I'll say a little bit more about this in a minute, that there's some problems because of the lateness of the census data. So what we're going to do next is we're going to look at some of the new rules based upon these citizen-led reforms. Now, some of these rules, some of the new rules apply at the federal level, some at the state level, some at both. the new rules that were passed are going to make it harder to gerrymander because the districts have to be compact. They can't sprawl out all over the place. The district has to be connected. You can't have one part of the district completely isolated or one district surrounded by another district. The new rules want us to keep communities together, attempt to keep counties, cities, and other important communities together rather than splitting them up into multiple districts. And the hearings are required. So this looks at some of the new rules for at the state level. Now, as I mentioned before, that the Constitution says we are to have 33 Senate districts, 99 House districts, and each of these Senate districts must wholly contain 3 House districts. So they're going to be nested. And you can think that you can imagine that this would allow for better communication, coordination between the senators and the members of the House of Representatives. And for representational fairness, now what we want is that we see the legislature does resemble how the citizens feel as a whole. If about 55% of all Ohioans want Republican representatives, then we should see something similar to that. Now, I have not seen any numbers on how close it has to be, so there's a little bit of wiggle room here. Now, we have a redistricting commission that is going to oversee this process. On this commission, it consists of 3 people who are elected statewide, the governor, the auditor, the secretary of state, and then 2 people elected by Democrats in the state assembly and 2 people elected by Republicans. Now, the new rules, they rein in, as I said, some of the worst. Are going to stop some of these aspects of gerrymandering. Bipartisan, there has to be bipartisan approval. The splits, as I'm going to talk about in the next slide, transparency. We can't be surprised by these maps, and we're given the opportunity to participate. So this is a map that shows a district, Cuyahoga, that has been split 4 ways. Cuyahoga County is split into 4 separate districts, and that is going to be no longer permitted. Of our counties, the majority of them, 65, must be entirely contained within a district. We can have some number that are split into 2 and a smaller number split into 3 if it's necessary, but the goal is to keep them intact. So this splitting of a county into 4 districts can no longer happen.
Thank heavens.
So this side, it says you can't do that anymore. Although here's something that I think is too strong of a statement for this image on the left. Mercer County is split into 3 districts, but it's actually quite a small county. Based upon the estimates that I could get off the web, I think it has only about 40,000 residents, which is about the size of Findlay. So by population size, there isn't a need for it to be split. And if there isn't a need, then the residents might prefer for the county to be kept intact, and that would be encouraged. District 16 spreads all out into these odd directions. It includes all of one county and then actually reaches up and takes little bites out of 5 counties, including Cuyahoga and Summit. Both of those split into 4 districts, which will not happen anymore. Now, some communities like Columbus, the population is so large that it's probably going to need to be split. And the citizens of Columbus need to think about, if we have to split up Columbus, what really makes sense? How does it make sense to do that? Where should we be drawing these boundaries? So this shows the new redistricting process and how it's going to proceed. And I'm going to fess up here that, as you can see, this is so complicated and some of these details I don't know about, but I want to mostly go through these first couple of steps. So it's our General Assembly that has the first shot of creating districts. But there has to be a fairly good agreement among the General Assembly. 60% of all members and 50% of the two largest parties, which is the Democrats and the Republicans, have to agree on these districts. If they agree, then the governor will sign the bill. And of course, we have the ability to take a look at it and have referendums. But if we're satisfied with it, then it's going to be approved. Now, if the Assembly can't agree, there isn't bipartisan support, then it's that commission that gets a chance at creating districts. And here, each of both of the Democrats who were appointed by members of the Assembly and both of the Republicans have to be satisfied with that. If they are, then it will be approved. Again, we have the ability to raise questions into referendum. So that's pretty much all I want to say about this chart. So the census. Now, if you've been paying attention to the news, you know there's been a delay. The delay occurred because of COVID, the difficulties collecting the data, and also for some political issues, who should be counted in the census. So we are stuck, and that might delay the process. However, Fair Districts is thinking about, can we come up with some reasonably reliable data sets on populations that will at least allow us to begin thinking about how we want our districts to be drawn? So here is a bit about the timeline, and some of this timeline is actually specified in the Ohio Constitution, which is why the governor is getting a little nervous about this. What I want to do, so this is the timeline for the deadlines. I want to say a little bit about this 10-year versus 4-year, because the goal is to create districts that we have bipartisan agreement on, that will last for the entire 10-year period until the next census. If we cannot get bipartisan agreement, then we can create districts that will last for 4 years with less bipartisan agreement, but that will then have to be redesigned. So there is a possibility and a concern that we might have partisan districts in for the 2022 elections. So that's all that I'm going to say about this slide.
Wow, I did not remember that. I didn't get that.
So somebody isn't muted. Somebody's not muted.
Last 4 years, and you have to do it again.
Okay. So that's only if there's not bipartisan agreement. So the U.S. Supreme Court has already taken a hands-off approach. They ruled that gerrymandering is a political issue that needed to be resolved by the legislative branch of the government, not by the judicial. And they actually had 2 cases to look at. So 2 of the plaintiffs that we had, there was one plaintiff from a state that was gerrymandered in favor of Republicans, a second state that was gerrymandered in favor of the Democrats. So they took this hands-off approach, but we can challenge the maps in the Ohio Supreme Court. So ways to be involved. One of the documents that I sent out to be distributed to you contains some of these links. So again, this these were prepared by Fair Districts. They asked me not to alter them, but you cannot click here on a PowerPoint. I may be able to send you these slides. I'm going to ask them if I can, but one document that I sent has all of these links, many of these links. So if you want to get their emails, you can get involved. If you want to join the Speakers Bureau, you can be involved. To be part of the watchdog, we need people who are keeping an eye on what our legislature is doing. And there are training sessions for all of these. Writing a letter to the editor. One of the speakers that I heard during the training said that our representatives care when their name is mentioned in a paper. So writing letters to the editor is important. Virtual testimony. So I'm hoping that by the time we get active in this process, COVID will be a slightly distant memory. But as of now, many people are worried about having to give testimony, having to be physically present. So we should still be arguing for the option at least to give testimony virtually. Community map making. Now, I was told that some people, and particularly those of you up in Toledo, will be interested in this. Now, I did attend the training on this, but it's not something that I got additional training on. I know a little bit about it, but it is this tool where it calls up a map so that if your community has to be split, and Toledo, particularly when it comes to the state House of Representatives, Greater Toledo does have to be split. So how do you do it? This map allows you, it calls up a map of Toledo, and then you can say, for example, these neighborhoods, their middle school is here, and the middle school should be in the same district as these neighborhoods. Here's the library that we go to. So by using this tool, you can identify important landmarks that should be kept in the same district, and with a click of a button, it will actually preserve or draw a boundary around those landmarks. So you can be involved in that, or you can, these training sessions were recorded so you can see them, see YouTubes. They're going to have a map making competition, and the transparency team again is learning how you can effectively request information using public records, and then advocate, and then contact the representatives to question how the process is going. So the timeline, I've obviously been trained, so the trainings are going on now. The campaign to get people informed, to let our politicians know we're keeping an eye on them. And then after the census data becomes available, then we'll start the formal process of making these maps. But as I said, we should be thinking about this now. Common Cause and Fair Districts are going to be creating some postcards that you can use to communicate to your representatives. Let them know that you're aware that we have this new process, that Ohioans want fair maps, and that these reforms were passed in all of the counties. So this is I didn't include this slide. Well, I did give you the link for Fair Districts, but there are plenty of sources online where you can get better informed on some of the nitty gritty. So what as I said, I do have some more slides that deal specifically with Northwest Ohio. On the one of the documents, it had a link to an online evaluation of this presentation. So Fair District wants to know what you think about this. So if there are any questions about this basic process, I can entertain them now, and then we can look into a little bit of detail about what is happening in Northwest Ohio in terms of the districts. So if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself. and just ask the questions, or I can just go on if I don't get any questions.
I just have one question. You had mentioned that for the U.S. House of Representatives that the seats had not changed parties in the last 10 years. Do you know what the situation is for the Ohio House?
Let's see. I think, no, I don't have that data. I don't have that data. But that's a great question, and that would be a good bit of information to find out.
Could I maybe add a little bit of information there? Because of the naturalization area, there's 21 counties in Northwest Ohio, and the Toledo League does a little bitty directory for them, which lists the state house and Senate. And I just redid that from the last election, and no districts changed hands in terms of party. And of course, that's the only time that I observed that, because that was the first time I've done that. But my guess is that is the way it's been working, you know, that it's the same as in the congressional area. No districts have changed parties for either the Senate or the state house, or the House of Representatives for the state.
Any other questions?
Comment that Arnold Schwarzenegger is a big participant in this effort, and he says that during the entire time he was governor of California, no district changed hands because they're all gerrymandered.
Okay, so let's look at our districts. Okay, now, so these slides, the previous slides were slides that were given to me by the Fair Districts organization. These next set of slides were ones that I created in part by pulling images off the web. I gave you, or I asked to be forwarded to all of you, a handout. And as I said, consider that a draft, because actually as it was a challenge. You can't find one map that shows all of the cities and all of the districts and the county, the boundaries of the counties. So I had to basically like consult a bunch of maps to try and prepare this. And I did find one error, and I will point that out to you. So starting with the Ohio State Senate districts. And so focusing on the Toledo area, and then my area, Bowling Green down here in Wood County. So my Ohio Senate district, Senate District 2, consists of all of Wood County, all of Ottawa County, all of Erie County, and then a bit of Lucas County, the eastern part of Lucas County, and then it stretches out here to capture some of Fulton County. So step one is for us to think about is, does this make sense? Is there a better way to draw these or better counties to include that would make more sense in terms of communities that are important to us? Now, District 11, the Senate district, is most of the greater Toledo area. Now, this shows you the convoluted boundary between District 11, District 11, which is the Toledo district, and then my district, District 2. So District 2 comes up and snatches Ottawa Hills from the rest of Toledo, and also includes parts of Sylvania. Now, this does not make sense to me. One of the things I thought about is that one thing that might make a natural boundary is if you do have to split a community if you follow a freeway, then you do have neighborhoods that are potentially split by that, but that would seem to be more logical than this this sort of ducking in and out to capture these bites of these communities. So the state house districts, so these are the state house districts that are in my district. So District 3, all of Wood County. So based on the last census, the population of Wood County was such that it could comprise a house district all by itself. Don't know if that's going to still be the case. Ottawa and Erie County were so small that they were combined into one district. And then we have District 47 that's composed of the part of Lucas and the part of Fulton County. And one of the things, and why it's important to really talk to people in different communities, is it looks like Wauseon is oddly split, maybe straddled, or Swanton, they're kind of straddling two districts. I'm not going to say that for sure, because I'm just kind of eyeballing it from the maps, but people who live in these communities need to think about, are these district lines drawn in such a way that divides our community? So here we have state house districts in the Toledo area. So we have 44 that stretches just a little bit northeast of the Southwick area, captures downtown Toledo. 45, mostly north of Toledo, but then circles around and captures the east side of the Maumee River. And then sprawling 46 that runs from Holland along the bottom and runs almost to McGee Marsh. Looking at the US House districts, so here is my district, District 5, that fully includes 11 counties, so has 11 counties that aren't split, and then splits Lucas, splits Ottawa, and splits this poor little Mercer County. So the snake stretches from downtown Toledo across all of these districts here. We've already talked about it, to the outskirts of Cleveland. Now this is where I made the mistake. This is not the eastern part of District 9, but it's the western part of District 9. So I drew a line through that because on your handout, it's going to say eastern. So hopefully this will remind you that this is western so you don't get confused. But it again shows how Greater Toledo is being split, that Ottawa Hills and Sylvania are not in the same district as is the bulk of Toledo. Now, based upon my estimates, I'm going to go back to this slide for a minute. Look, in pulling data off of the web, and again, I can't be 100% confident of this because it's not the solid census data, but I think that the populations of Lucas County and the population of Wood County are such that it could be one district. And we could, at least me down here in Bowling Green, I can argue why I think that's a good reason. I shop in Toledo. I go to restaurants in Toledo. I have hospitals in Toledo. I care about what happens in the Maumee River. So for a lot of reasons, it really makes sense to think of us as one community and to be in the same district. So that's the slide presentation. I will go to stop sharing and see if there are any additional questions, comments, or discussion. I apologize. The screen may have been blocked by that little bar at the top. So I said, I'm a newbie at this, and was afraid that if I tried to get rid of it, I wouldn't be able to find it again.
Deb, I have a question. It's about one of your first slides, and you were giving the perfect representation, and you said something that you didn't like that.
Okay, so me personally, I want a competition of ideas. So in that one slide, you had 2 safe cat seats and 3 safe dog districts, because 3 entirely packed with dogs, 2 entirely packed with cats. Now, I would prefer to be in a district where there was some chance of where the outcome wasn't a foregone conclusion, so that the politicians, they had to argue, they had to really convince the citizens that their position on an issue was correct. And you only do that if you have a little bit of diversity within the district. At least that's my opinion. I see you disagree.
I don't know how you make it fair. I'm trying to understand that.
That's a great question. And so political parties should, in my opinion, should really be kind of the last thing. The first thing is to think about it. And as I tried to argue, like if you are 10 miles outside of Cleveland, why are you in a congressional district with Toledo at the opposite side of the state? Because again, when you then write to your congressperson to advocate for something that's going on in Toledo that you're worried about, if that congressman, if Cleveland is not in that congressperson's district, I mean, I don't really know what happens, but would that congressman be stepping on toes? Does that congressperson have less of an ability to advocate? So first of all, thinking about keeping communities together, which will probably create some safe districts for Republicans, some safe districts for Democrats, but then have some districts in which there's more of an even split, because the constituents are more of an even split, even though they may be in the same county. But there again would have to be a competition of ideas.
I just wanted to say, when I was working on a campaign in District 5, we went down to the street level on the maps to look at it. And having been a Toledo teacher, I knew that it was all the wealthier school districts in Toledo were included in District 5, our district. And also, I noticed too that it would cut around all the neighborhoods that surrounded country clubs. Because I worked in South Toledo, I knew it cut around the houses that surrounded Heather Downs and the houses that surrounded Toledo Country Club. So, you know, it was pretty obvious to me looking at you know, that they were putting the wealthier people with Perrysburg and Bowling Green and whatever. And
yeah, are there any more questions for Deb, or comments or anything?
I would just like to thank Deb, because it's been so informative. Excellent presentation, and thanks for all the slides. Really, really good work. Thank you.
Great. I'm really passionate about this. I was looking forward to being retired so that I could focus on this. And I'm sorry that obviously the next thing I need to learn is a little bit more about the technology, because I'm a little bit afraid of closing some panes that I may need in the future, because if I close them, I might not be able to find them again. But I'll try and get a little more tutoring on that.
Yeah, Deb, I have a question. I noticed that your slides are in PowerPoint format. And when I went back to the Fair Districts website and saw those slides, I didn't see them in PowerPoint format. How did you get those in PowerPoint?
I downloaded them. So they gave me a link and I downloaded them. I think, were you looking at them on the web?
I was looking at them as the result of someone's talk. I think Fair Districts talk that maybe Catherine Terser and, you know, some other, Jen Miller and some other people had provided. And the slides all ran together and it's like, I wouldn't be able to use those, but I noticed that yours are in PowerPoint, and because your talk is very good and I'm very inspired and am already working on my own talk to get. And I have my first letter to the editor ready to go to the Blade and probably the Sandusky newspaper and maybe Fremont Port Clinton, because I live in Ottawa County, about a couple miles from where the bridge crosses from one county to the other. And the only way, so we're contiguous by means of a bridge in the Stank on the Lake district.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's really great. And as I said, you can just, they will give you, if you're one of the speakers, they give you one document with some links. And I just clicked on the link and it says to the full slides. And when I downloaded them, they were in PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll follow up with that. Thank you.
They've got great training.
Yes, I absolutely am inspired by the training, not only from Fair Districts, but yesterday there was an ACLU, a couple days ago, ACLU presentation. And yesterday it's Ohio Voter Rights Coalition. And there are lots of training materials. And we need to get this out and identify groups that might want to hear it. And one thing I heard yesterday, which I never thought of before, was religious groups. Churches need to hear this. And so maybe we all have a church or know of several church groups that we might approach and offer to do presentations to their church council or to, you know, whatever groups they might have.
I'm retired from Defiance College, so from working in Defiance, I developed some friendships with people in that part of the state. So I've actually been talking with them, you know, in part sort of gently approaching the ideas that, well, you know, what I'm thinking is for the U.S. House is that we here in Wood County get divorced from the rest of you, and we join in with Lucas to form one district, which. Just to see how they feel about that, and again, that's just we won't know yet. We won't know until those census results come out if that's feasible. But I think that that's going to be a possibility that the population numbers will work out.
Somewhere you mentioned you didn't know the boundaries of the population, but I think whatever the number is they arrive at, the districts have to be from 95% of that to 105 or 115 or something percent of that number, that target number.
Yeah, they can vary from each other by about 5% of the target.
Yeah.
Well, Deb, thank you very much. Unless there are any other questions, I just want to thank Deb for putting this together for us and refreshing our memories. And also, one of the important things is to keep contacting your elected representatives about the importance of making sure the districts are fair. We have a good chance with the new legislation to have the transparency that was lacking in 2010. So just, you know, keep at it, keep talking with your friends and neighbors about the importance of this. And those letters to the editor are great. You know, we can just make this a major topic for 2021.
Yeah, it's a little bit frustrating to me that some of the papers, they will have like a limit. Like if you write a letter, they accept the letter, then they make you wait 3-4 months before they'll accept another letter. I mean, if anybody wants ideas.
There are what, 20 of us here. Yeah. And if 10 of us wrote a letter, you know, we could have a letter in the paper like every other day.
Yeah, and if somebody wants help too, I mean, maybe if they're a little bit shy about composition, then working together, I'd be certainly willing to work with people.
There also is that training for letters to the editors through the Fair Districts. So there's some ideas there. So Okay, again, if no other questions or comments.
Deborah's doing another presentation in April.
Right.
Deborah's doing members.
Yeah, it's going to be basically the same thing, though. I think my understanding was the idea.
Get here today.
Yeah, my understanding was is this just ensures the greatest number of people will actually be able to take part of it, and hopefully I'll be a little bit more tech savvy by then.
Yeah, so the next one is scheduled by Deb with us on Wednesday, April 7th at 7 p.m. So the link will be going out again from the presidents of each of the organizations. I do want to thank everyone who emailed me requesting to be part of it, and concerned that maybe I would have missed someone is why we asked the presidents to send the link to everybody in their organization. So again, thank you all for participating, and thank you, Deb, for putting this together for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for attending. And nice meeting you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.